Let me quote you. A research by Mori, commissioned by a number of major banking and financial institutions, found that the public, as it says, is utterly unconvinced of the need for cuts. Only a quarter believe there's a need to cut services to reduce national debt, while 50% don't think cuts are necessary at all. 48% think more rather than less should be spent on public expenditure. And then a lovely bit of British euphemism sums up saying the public obviously struggles to see a compelling or urgent case for reforming public services and unfortunately appears to remain deeply attached to their traditional values. So there is another tacit admission that we have the public on our side. This campaign doesn't go against the grain at times. Many of our struggles over the course of the last 25, 30 years has been a sense almost. It's been very difficult going against the grain. We are with the public and the public are with us. There is a massive growing sense of anger that we must harness through the sort of campaigns that have been talked about. And that involves not just active opposition to the cuts. Obviously, and I'll say something in a moment about that. But it also means putting a clear alternative, exposing the damaging experiments of privatisation, but pointing out that this is in fact an income crisis, not a spending crisis. We demand the resources to collect the tax of the super rich and the multinational companies. We demand the resources into revenue and customs. We demand closing of all the tax loopholes with the tax havens. We propose a redistribution of wealth through a more progressive tax system, increasing rather than reducing as they have in the recent budget, corporation tax still set at Lawson and Thatcher levels. What about a windfall tax on the massive profits made by the banks and energy companies and the supermarkets? What about what's now called a Robin Hood tax, a minuscule tax on the trillions that are speculated around international markets on a daily basis? But most fundamentally, it's about making the case for nationalisation of the banks. It's about bringing the public utilities back under public ownership. It's about promoting a debate about expanding, not cutting back on public ownership, but not on the command and control model we've seen in the past that's dragged the name of socialism through the mud for far too long. We want democratic forms of workers' self-management and an expansion of public ownership. We need to make the case for trade unionism. PCS has shown, others have referred to the fact, it's actually a fact, every time PCS launches a campaign of industrial action, we get an upsurge in membership application forms into union headquarters. That is a provable fact. And when people say it's too difficult, I'll cite an example of a recent campaign we've just waged and we're about to win in the IT sector. We organised in a number of contracts, government contracts that were previously part of the civil service that have been sold off to largely multinational companies. We've recently waged a dispute in Hewlett-Packard. After 3 days industrial action, again, we found and we were told that the chief executive of Hewlett-Packard in the United States, one of the richest and most powerful IT companies, non-union, don't recognise unions in the United States, after the 3 days industrial action, with a vote for further 4 days industrial action, which were absolutely solid, the management in the UK told us they'd had a phone call from the chief executive in the United States, who phoned up bemoaning the fact that there'd been a series of articles in the San Francisco Advertiser reporting the industrial action of PCS members in the UK. That was damaging the good name and brand name of Hewlett-Packard, and he demanded that that dispute be settled as a matter of urgency. I mention that not just because it's a good news story, but it shows in practice that the struggle that we're engaged in is a truly global struggle. It's the same over issues like climate change. We need to make the case for a massive public investment to show that the fight for jobs is part and parcel of the fight for climate change. It's perfectly affordable and feasible to create millions of jobs in insulating homes and public buildings, of an integrated publicly run transport system, an investment in clean and renewable energy forms, and using to diversify the enormous manufacturing capacity that exists, not just in the UK, but across Europe, to direct it into socially useful production. But it's also critical, as I think virtually every speaker, not just in this session, but in the course of this conference today, has emphasised. We've got to build a trade union alliance, a public sector alliance at community, town, city, regional, national and international level, and it's as the most effective force to challenge the cuts and the agenda of European-wide governments. And let me just say, that involves building a united front from the ground up to support those involved in struggle in the most practical and financial way that we can. Working with community groups, with trades councils, with pensioners, with students and the young and the unemployed. We need to put pressure on the TUC to facilitate building links at local, regional and national level. We need to call on the TUC to mobilise as a first step for a national demonstration which would register the enormous power of the trade union movement, but would also show critically the public support that we have, and it would help us prepare the ground for the public sector general strike that will almost definitely be necessary. But we're not just talking, I think, as others have said. We have to prepare the ground, not just for building links amongst public sector unions. We have to build links between the public and the private sector. We have to make sure that there's European-wide days of action, and a conservative institution like the European TUC that has called for a day of action on the 29th of September, which is a weekday coinciding with a meeting of European ministers. We have to turn that into a European-wide general strike, with action taken in every major capital in Europe. And as others have said, that would show the enormous latent power that the trade union movement maintains and has never lost. And in the process, we're able to provide an ingredient that's been missing for far too long. And that is most of our members know that the government and the employers' agenda is against their interests. The missing ingredient has been building confidence. Confidence in the idea that joining a union, becoming active in a union, taking action as a union, building links across unions can make a difference. That can help us challenge the defeatism and fatalism that's afflicted the British trade union movement, that spent far too long ducking and diving and has forgotten how to land a punch. And that's what the trade union movement needs to consider, to build the confidence that we need, to show in practice that the slogan, workers of the world, unite, is more relevant now than at any time in human history, and we can show in practice that another world really is possible. Thanks very much for listening.